Uh, yeah. So make sure it's live. That's all. Well, it says that we are. Yeah. All right. I'll just check on my other platform. We'll get it going. Okay. I have on both platforms, I want to say. Right. How does it look? Okay. Alright, I think we're good. So. Yep. Going on both platforms, both YouTube and Instagram. Those are my only two platforms I have. So. Alright. I said about. It would take 20 minutes or so to talk about this, and I decided to do it live. Excuse me. I've decided to do this live and in one take instead of like pre-recorded beforehand. Yeah, and it should give me the opportunity to express thoughts in a possibly more authentic way. At least that's my hope. So I have a statement and an apology as well for the Oshkosh Youth Hockey Association. You don't know me. My name's Mason. I do a lot of hockey stuff, to say the least. One of my specialties or things that I work on, is I work with this. You want to get to know me more. I work with this little startup called Train 2.0, and the main mission there. And in layman's terms, is essentially bringing to light mechanics that have been hidden, bringing to light mechanics that the best NHLers do in games. And my goal is to teach that to anyone that I coach and also learn it myself. And along the way, I've come to find out a bunch of things as well ever since I first discovered Train 2.0 itself and Jason too. Yeah, and part of that is that everything is taught differently than the traditional hockey sense that is taught. And I think that should be brought to light and put into more context for everyone here, especially those that have never been introduced to it before, which I'm not surprised. We only have a list of about 3,500 people on an email list, so I'm not surprised at all that, it's excuse me, and that's like worldwide, I should say. That's worldwide. That's not including like anyone else that has had a further outreach to that. So that's just for context around me. Now let's address the actual situation that happened, and I first want to go over what I take responsibility for. Have them written down. Biggest thing that I started out with was communication. It would have been better to talk to parents beforehand, to give a little lack of surprising that what's going to happen. Like, that would have been better, and I think that would have been a more productive way to have the conversation for the misbehavior that I saw as well. So communication in the form, in this case, I could have ask for access to bring more emails and give the parents a notice ahead of time. That's the word I was looking for. Given the parents a notice ahead of time. That's what I mean by communication. I also got personal without permission. Yeah, my main question for that conversation was, how often do you guys talk to your parents? My goal was to get to the source of the misbehavior. And like I mentioned in the talk, I am not someone who will just use the Herb Brooks style of coaching, where you're just bagging people or players to exhaustion. If anything, that's proven to be less effective, especially nowadays. Just with new discoveries, new sciences, new ideas, and visions as well. Different stuff that's more productive. And that includes, let's just say, talking down on players. Traditionally, hockey culture is toxic. In fact, it's one of the sports that is furthest behind the times than other sports. And in my attempt to bring it to light all at once in one setting, that sparked, it wasn't the most effective way at all to go about it. Sometimes things take time, and I tend to rush them a lot. So definitely communication as well ties into the fact that I got too personal. If I let the parents know beforehand through communication, through emails, that I was going to talk about this and that I did not tolerate the misbehavior that I saw, maybe I would have allowed you guys, maybe that would have given you a sign of permission for me to have the conversation, to get maybe a little bit more personal. Not too much, because there's a limit. We all have the limits on that, especially since it's personal. We all have our limits on how personal we get. But I'm pretty sure that if I just made that one adjustment, this wouldn't have happened. So, and I also acknowledge that the teachings were not at all effectively taught. They were ineffectively taught on my part. And that's going to happen as well with a system, with a mechanical system, I should say. Even themselves, they're not traditionally what you see with hockey, where everything's all fast-paced. And I'm telling these guys to do the exact opposite, to slow down, to get the feel of different movements. That's one aspect where the teachings were ineffectively taught. The other aspect is the comparing sports and life and how they're not really different. If you ask me, they're not different. You can take teachings from both your sports and life, and you can apply them together into your talent stack. In my mind, if you separate those two instead of merging them together, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, because there's commonalities across any spectrum that you put yourself into. So if you want context into why I brought that up, there you go. There's your context. So, and look, it wasn't effectively taught on my part. Honestly, I'm still trying to find the best ways to persuade those teachings. I'm not good at it, and I acknowledge that. So, one last thing. I've also taken for granted how much people I often say misrepresent messages, but they'll put their own spin on what you're trying to say as well, especially if like it's new for the first time, or traditionally you've been in a culture that's toxic, everyone's yelling, so it's easy to have the initial assumption, initial reaction that something that you hear is new, that has a more inclusive message to it, is not going to be taken as well, especially if you've been so used and you've done it before. You've done it before, and you keep doing it, so you keep passing on to the next generation. Which in that mindset is unproductive in of itself. But I could have better formulated the messaging that I was trying to say so that you guys would understand it better. Could have made it simpler. Could always make it simpler. And I took that for granted. So that's what I take responsibility for. The communication, getting personal without permission, having my teachings that I am teaching being ineffectively taught. They all tie together. If I had to point to one big thing that I would improve for next time, it would be communication. That everything else beyond that always ties back to some sort of form of communication. So, yeah. With that being said, with all that being said, I have some feedback for the rest of you. And I don't want you to take this personally, or to possibly infer the message in a negative light, and that I'm somehow this like bad person as well. If that happens, I can't control it. What I am trying to do is persuade. So if you view what I'm going to say through that lens, through a persuasion filter, a persuasion lens, you're going to understand what I'm saying better. So just listen to my words. I'm not calling out any individual when I say this. And I want to prepare you for what I'm about to say, which is why I'm talking this way, prepping you for it. So, here's what I wanted to say. I don't appreciate, and I'm disappointed that I was treated like a pedophile. I'm disappointed that I was treated like a pedophile. And I mean it. I'm disappointed, and I don't appreciate that I was treated like a pedophile. Where I'm getting that interpretation, by the way, I worked at a YMCA. A lot of kids are around. I was coaching some kids. The email that I saw from one of the families suggested that I had some inappropriate behavior around kids that I was coaching with parents watching. Is it really that far of a stretch for me to assume that if that was from a different perspective, that messaging could have easily applied to someone who is actually a pedophile? Is that really far of a stretch? Again, I'm around kids. I worked at a YMCA. You could see in the email, is inappropriate behavior around kids. And we're going to take disciplinary action. They also called the cops on me. They didn't give me a reason for termination. Isn't that what you do to pedophiles? You just want to get them out and not give a reason. With all of that in mind, is it really that far of a stretch for me to assume that I was treated the same way a pedophile would be treated? And I really question that. Because that hurts when I don't do that. Especially when I know that there's families and kids that I've coached, clients that I've coached, online and in person, who look up to me. And I know that. I also want to bring to light a conversation that we probably should have, which I'm going to call mental health persuasion. Because this plays into this plays into the conversation. Because I'm not going to deny that I have been reactionary. Because I have been reactionary. And that persuades you to believe that I'm in a poor place mentally. Just an FYI, my mental health has been the healthiest it's been in my life, which I don't know if that's saying anything. But, excuse me. So yeah, I don't know if that says anything compared to what it was before. But I don't need to go to a counselor to get an understanding of what I see. And not every incident involves mental health, and that making everything about that does a huge disservice to those who are actually mentally ill. And that is not me. I am not mentally ill right now. I just have a different way of thinking because I'm persuasive. I'm learning to be persuasive. I'm not good at it, but I'm learning. And I'm trying. So what I'm talking about is I sparked cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias. In any of the reasons for my termination, that's what I'm going to bring to light. Because you can see that from my end as well. I have my own cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias. The reason I'm calling it mental health persuasion is the fact that everything that is reactionary from a lack of from unskilled listening and unskilled and unproductive thinking. The reason that it's mental health persuasion is because you combine unskilled listening and unskilled, unproductive thinking, and you create a situation where if you get a few people who are just a little bit reactive, you actually create this little mental insanity, temporary mental insanity. And that's what I experienced. That's what I experienced. It's not just with this or with my last year of juniors as well. Everything ties back to that. This occurs everywhere. And if you want the biggest, most relatable situation of cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias, look to the 2016 election. Look to the 2016 election, and you'll see it. If you have a persuasion filter on that, you will better understand what actually happened during that election. It's helped me. It's been the clearest understanding for me for what happened during that election and why the United States is more divisive than ever. It's not about the facts and science. It's about the persuasion. It's more powerful than anything. That's why you see people get away with not being scientific and not being factually accurate. It's because they're persuasive. Persuasion and manipulation look alike, especially at first. Persuasion's for the greater good. Manipulation's for the good of one person. There's a difference between the two. And not everyone understands that. And I get it now. I get it now. That I can apply that same concept to the possible reasons for what happened here. And I don't want to dissuade that from happening. I don't want to dissuade that from what I take responsibility for. Because there's a difference. I can say both those things at the same time. Both those things can be true. Everyone's doing something wrong, including me. Everyone's doing something wrong, including me. That's a persuasion trick. So, that's pretty much all I have to say to warbirds. And again, I will take responsibility for the lack of communication and getting personal without permission, having my teachings that I was trying to teach be ineffectively taught. And I know I have in front of me tools to better persuade so that people don't misrepresent what I'm trying to say and the messages that I'm trying to say. Because I don't want to be caught in the trap of this mental health persuasion, which again does a huge disservice to those who are actually mentally ill. And I am not one of those people who is mentally ill. I just have this different way of thinking. And I understand not everyone understands it. So that's all I have to say. I have one more thing. This is different from trying to change the past. This is not trying to change the past. There is a difference. There's a clear difference. This is addressing what happened so it doesn't happen again. It cleans up the spaghetti that was spilled on the floor, cleans it up, and then you put a structure in place so it doesn't happen again. That's what I'm doing here. It's different from addressing the past. And I don't know how else to reach out other than go live and in one take. So, there you go. And I'm sorry for upsetting anyone who got upset and all that sort of stuff. And like I said, I take responsibility for, I already said that. I know this is long. We're up to 25 minutes now. everyone involved in this is doing something wrong, including me. That's persuasion.